We are switching gears a little bit today. We're gonna be talking about curating a wardrobe and the guilt that we feel around it. There are so many different elements online right now that are trying to tell us the right and wrong ways to collect things or how not to collect things. Minimalism, maximalism, it feels like we're all kind of infighting about it. And it all comes back to this paradox of conscious consumerism. So by the end of this video, I hope to have y'all feel more empowered and less guilty about your consumption habits and clothes in general. So let's go ahead and jump in. The painting is back. It was not unanimous, but it was pretty much a landslide on my last video. I was like, all right, y'all, how do you feel about the void? And everyone was like, bring back the painting. So I have to agree, I love it. I have to be honest also, I have a pretty great wardrobe, and it is something that I feel like has been a labor of love or like a personal passion project for years and years and years. And I'm not gonna say that I've always done everything right. And I do also like to borrow philosophies from other people. So I have to give credit to somebody like Amy Smilovic. I think that she does an incredible job. She's the owner of Tibby. She has entire philosophies of curriculum in order to help you curate your own personal style, which I think is just so valuable. But before we can even talk about the curation itself, we have to address the guilt around getting clothes in the first place. It feels like no matter what route you take, there is someone or some kind of abstract judgment that is trying to make you feel guilty about what you're doing. First of all, you know, women or femme-presenting people, we tend to be kind of maligned for our passion for pretty things, you know, throughout history. Not to say that men can't love shiny things, they do, but it is historically kind of a tool of the patriarchy that we could deep dive on in a whole other video about how beauty for beauty's sake is just kind of like a worthless endeavor that is perpetuated by women, because all of our endeavors are worthless, right? Anyway, I want to start by saying that I hope it's well understood that I fully believe in the worth of beauty for beauty's sake. I mean, that's the entire reason for my job, and honestly, I think it's what makes life worth living, and that we should have no guilt about that. The horrors persist, and it is up to us to find beauty among it all, right? So other than the idea of liking pretty things in the first place, where does our current day guilt come from when it comes to our decisions around shopping? I feel like it comes down to what I call the conscious consumerism paradox. Anytime you're talking about buying new clothes on the internet, there is usually two parties. There is the I think you should only buy sustainable things, therefore fewer better things, therefore things should be expensive because they were made with sustainable materials by people in the United States being paid a living wage, etc. And then the people going, I can't afford to do that. And there seems to be almost no willingness to compromise, not necessarily on a person-to-person basis, but between the two philosophies online. It's like, you know, being a vegan versus being some kind of like carnivore, you know? There are like these extreme tropes around it, right? It's like one assumes that the other is like this, you know, snobby kind of elitist group looking down their noses at them. And then there's the assumption that the other group is just like a bunch of savages, just like wild animals equipped with a credit card on the internet. And we're just gonna go buy everything from Shein because we don't have any kind of guardrails in place. And it's like, no, like none of that is true, because there is this thing called nuance, and humans have the power to discern. And I personally think it's kind of unnatural to try and shove us into these very binary boxes. To me, the solution is actual conscious consumerism, meaning we are humans who are present of mind, and as long as we remain present of mind, we don't need these strict rules about what's allowed and what isn't based on our very polar philosophies. It's about taking into consideration all elements at play before you make a purchase and deciding from there for yourself. So what initially sparked the idea for this video was I looked at my wardrobe and I realized it is constructed almost entirely of investment pieces that I really agonized over and finally bit the bullet on and like saved up for, and what I would call filler pieces. Filler pieces makes them sound negligible, but let's talk about this, right? The internet is full of brands that want to claim or want to purport an aesthetic of being sustainable, being mindful, like they want to seem conscious, right? They want you to think that spending your money there is a positive decision for the world at large, right? But if you look, those garments are being made in the same place as the same ones that you're gonna find on Amazon. So that's not to say that manufacturing can't be above board anywhere. What I'm saying is that they're probably the same manufacturers that are making the garment. You're just being asked to pay $200 for the one coming out of Australia and like $35 for the one that's on Amazon. So as a conscious consumer, we're going to use our noodles, you know what I mean? Like, that's pretty obvious, right? It's like you look just a little bit closer than face value, than the way that they've spent their money on branding, and you realize that those people who are kind of trying to purport themselves as being like sustainable and designer or whatever are probably pocketing 99% of the cost there, and you could just as easily go on Amazon and get the literally the same thing. And especially when we're talking about something like cotton or a lightweight linen or something like that, it's something that is going to wash the same way no matter what. Gauze. I'm a huge fan of gauze because as you wash it, it puckers like this, and so it literally like can't wrinkle. It's incredible. Don't pay $200 for a gauze dress. You want to be able to knock something like this around. I have 3 of these little sets from Amazon, and they each cost me like $35, $36, and I wear the daylights out of them. And there is a certain consideration to be had too. I mean, obviously you can get pretty much anything sort of duped for a lower price somewhere else on the internet. But again, when it comes to natural fibers, you're talking about something that like, oh, okay, we're bloating the industry, we're bloating the world with a bunch of manufactured goods, but at the same time, it's like, okay, well, if it's a natural fiber, you could argue that that's biodegradable. I can put that in my compost pile. I'm probably not going to, but I could. You know, once this is totally worn out, I could literally use it as cheesecloth because that's what it is. And so those might not be the values that matter to you when you're making a purchase, but I guess what I'm saying is like, it's not about the binaries of what you're being told to consider. It's about considering kind of everything that's important to you. And that also includes like how much money you're willing to spend on something, okay? So if I'm buying things on Amazon because they're less expensive, does that make me an irresponsible consumer? And to that I say, let's get a little bit cerebral and talk about something called class conflict, okay? Class conflict is a broader economic term having to do with obviously the strata of different, you know, tax brackets and their push and pull of power, right? That's just a generalization, but how it pertains to this conversation is that the super elite, the owners of these gigantic companies, right? The billionaires. I don't think there are any billionaires watching my channel, and if there are, I hope that you have made peace with the fact that we don't find you relatable. So that said, by design of the super elite, the 0.0001%, there has been this convenient class conflict structure between the middle class and the, you know, just sub-middle class, right? Where we are pitted against one another based on some of the smallest differences, like the ability to spend $30 on something versus $100 on something. And it's that kind of infighting that they rely upon for us to kind of like stay busy and stay in conflict with one another so that we don't hold them accountable, because their errors, honestly, their habits, the manufacturing processes are so much more egregious on such an exponentially larger scale than anything that we are doing by voting with our dollars. And so the guilt gets passed to us, and we sort of pass it back and forth to each other in this, like, you know, middle class conflict, while it is actually these huge companies, these huge corporations that if they were to change their habits, it would change everything. We as consumers, I mean, if you're not familiar with it, throughout my childhood, we had this advertising campaign that was like, you have the power to recycle plastic, right? And it was like, make sure that you always recycle your plastic bottles. Even now you'll see a commercial that's like, make sure you include the cap. And for what? It's all a lie. It was companies realizing that plastic was not biodegradable, passing the buck to the consumer and saying like, well, you know, recycling is a thing. We're gonna recycle. And the word recycle was actually kind of not even a real thing. It was sort of a lie in and of itself, because plastic doesn't really recycle, and what we were doing was actually selling our scrap used plastic to China. And so China stopped buying it from us a little while ago, and the whole myth was busted. We were like, oh, plastic is never recycled in the first place, and it is the corporations that we should be holding accountable for this stuff, not blaming ourselves for it. Recycle, yes. Do as much as you can, but it is on such a like a minuscule, vanishingly small scale, like what we are capable of, versus the kinds of change that could happen at a systemic level. And I feel like that goes towards the whole philosophy of voting with your dollar. What are you actually voting for is, again, an exercise in conscious consumerism. Trading your money for something that is what you want is not giving your power away. And especially when you are trading the right amount of money to you, you have right-sized the cost to what it is that you're buying, that is something that you have done to use the system to your advantage. We can really only exist within the system that we're in currently, and just like stopping eating meat is not going to make people stop farming cows, us voting with our dollar for sustainable companies is not going to make H&M stop pouring their toxic waste into, you know, waterways in Indonesia. The only way that that's ever going to happen is with government regulation, and so voting is going to do it, actually voting at the ballot box, not voting with your dollar, because they're always going to come back and blame us for it, and then we blame each other for it, and we should stop that. I actually just watched this interview with Mara Hoffman, who is one of my personal heroes. She is a beautiful, you know, fashion designer who was very much one of the voices at the forefront of paying a living wage, making clothing out of sustainable materials, making fewer better things. And it was very expensive, but it was all very considered and beautiful, and the entire supply chain was something that she, you know, really held herself to account for. And she just closed her brand for multiple reasons, and I will link the interview with her below because it is just lovely. She is just lovely. She's just lovely. She's, again, she's one of my icons. But it was like, yes, the brand wasn't necessarily doing all that well because people really, especially in this economy currently, paying $400 for a skirt is kind of a lot for people. And her stuff is pretty like wearable. It doesn't look like, you know, a ball gown or something. So it was like very secluded to like the elite in order to be able to like buy multiple pieces from her without like saving up or something. Like I have some of her pieces that I've either bought on super sale or like at a sample sale in New York City. Like that's how I get my Mara Hoffman pieces. All that to say, she was doing all of the right things, but it sheds a light on how expensive something has to be in order to preserve the integrity of the supply chain. And it's why buying fewer better things is actually such sort of like a harder thing to embark on, because it's such a huge decision for anybody really to spend that much money on one piece of clothing. Like I myself, when I talk about investment pieces, I'll invest in basics to a degree, but most of the time if I'm spending like luxury dollars on something, which I don't have a lot of luxury things. I'm not a handbag person, I'm a shoe person, you know, and I'm not spending a lot of money on my jewelry either. Like I think that jewelry is just about how it looks. Like I've always grown up with champagne taste on a beer budget, and I know that it is possible, okay? I think that everyone should be a snob to a certain degree. Being a snob doesn't mean that you are only spending tons of money on things. Being a snob means that you are discerning about the quality of the things that you're spending your money on, and the quality of it is something that's determined by you. All that to say, I splurge on leather, mostly leather goods, and also denim. Things that just last, okay? I think that really well-fitting denim is irreplaceable in my wardrobe. I think that really, really lovely leather, irreplaceable, will last forever and ever. I'm also, I mean, this is just my personal take, but like when they say it's vegan leather, I'm like, I'm not gonna pay designer prices for a plastic bag, okay? I'm going to pay designer prices for leather. But again, it's all about your values and what you place the value on and your consciousness in your next decision to consume. And so the Mara Hoffman thing kind of comes back to the fact that she said that she's like, one of the reasons that I stopped is because I couldn't reconcile with myself and my own values that creating things, no matter how ethically, it was still creating more stuff, you know? And she's like, I just can't just keep making more stuff and pouring more stuff into the world, into the earth. And so sometimes the most ethical thing, if we want to go to an extreme, is to not make at all. And when we have people thinking like that versus people in like the very, very large corporations who are absolutely not thinking like that, it's really putting us at a disadvantage in terms of buying fewer better things or buying sustainable only things, because the market is literally stacked against us. So we're really trying to do the best that we can. And again, we shouldn't be trying to make each other feel guilty about our decisions when we are kind of left in a system that doesn't work for us. So this has brought me to a few conclusions. One, the idea of a fewer better wardrobe doesn't always work. I want all of us to take a moment, maybe longer than a moment, and think very critically about how we approach shopping. And I don't mean from a guilt standpoint. I don't want you to be like, I want you to think about your habits and then look at your budget and I want you to feel bad about yourself. I want you to think about whether you are a true minimalist in the sense that when you're shopping, it's almost kind of exhausting to you and you want to just solve a need and it's an essential need and then that's it and you're like, oh, thank God. And you like feel relief after buying something because it means you don't have to shop for it anymore. Or if you're someone who enjoys the thrill of the hunt, because there's nothing wrong with either one of those, but it is so incredibly important to know which one you are. Because if you are lying to yourself and saying, this piece is gonna fix me, this piece is gonna fix me, no, this piece is gonna fix me, I'm solving my wardrobe by buying this very functional piece, but you're truly just a person who enjoys the thrill of getting new, beautiful things, you're going to end up spending so much money on a bunch of investment pieces that you have individually decided is going to solve something for you when you're never actually trying to solve anything to begin with. I am not trying to solve my wardrobe. My wardrobe is a hobby. My wardrobe is a passion. It's something that I always want to be curating. It is an artistic expression and there's nothing wrong with that. I've never gone into any kind of debt about my clothes, you know? And actually, I highly encourage y'all to watch Tiffany Ferg's video on the morality of debt because I totally agree, especially again, in our current economy, that like we all need to let ourselves have a little bit of grace in that respect too. But when I say that like I enjoy collecting, I do have to have some guardrails in place. And one of them is like, I don't ever want to spend money that I don't feel really comfortable spending, right? But I am at heart a maximalist. I love things. I love adorning myself. I love being a little bit different all the time. I don't like systematizing my style, and I totally understand that there are people who find a lot of comfort in systematizing their style. So if you are one, embrace that and go down the road of solving things. You know what I mean? Follow the minimalist influencers who are talking about how to truly curate a fewer better things wardrobe. But if you are someone who is thrilled by what's coming out on the runways and what is beautiful and new. And for me especially, like I hope y'all can relate to this, like I see things and I have like a visceral reaction, like it's my nervous system reacting to something beautiful. And that feeling has a name and it's called inspiration, right? And inspiration is not something, if you have it, if you come by it naturally, that creativity is not something to be suppressed. That's an unhealthy thing to do. Again, we have been sort of told our whole lives that it's so frivolous to like beautiful things, to like beauty for beauty's sake, to like clothes or like shopping. And that kind of internalized misogyny in our brains is making us go, well, I shouldn't let those kinds of things take hold of me because creativity and art and beauty for their own sake is just an expensive habit that's not really important. It's not essential to my life. I argue that it is not only essential to your life, but that letting those feelings course through you makes you actually sharpen your senses for what it is that you like and make better buying decisions based on things that you're passionate about instead of having sort of like knee-jerk panic purchases because you're like, I feel something. Wait, is what I feel important? Is what I feel something that I should listen to or not? I guess I'll just try, you know, and we end up feeling like we're sort of mired in this conflict between our inspiration and our guilt about experimenting, right? And it's like, give air, give oxygen, give, you know, vitamin D, whatever it is, to that part of yourself and let it grow. Let those muscles get hot, because when you can curate based on your own creativity, you start getting really razor sharp about your decision making, and you'll know what a hell yes feels like and you'll know what a meh feels like, and you actually make better buying decisions, especially speaking as a maximalist. So like I said, if you are a maximalist and you do enjoy the thrill of beautiful things and the newness of it, I just think that there are some important things to keep in mind. They're not necessarily guardrails, they're just sort of food for thought so that you can kind of isolate and again, sharpen the instincts that help you make really good decisions for yourself. When something really inspires you, when something stimulates you visually, look at the thing that you want and examine why you want it. And that doesn't mean question why you want it, just think on it. We're really trying to take guilt out of the equation here. This will help you see, have I scratched this itch before? Like if you feel like you're sort of like retracing steps, you're like, did I really like a super like minimal low profile pair of sandals before? Was there a pair that I liked better than this? Did I already buy a pair that already scratched this itch and filled this void in my inspiration for my wardrobe? Or is this something that's like coming back around because it's something that continues to be important to me? Maybe I should kind of revisit the other things that I loved as well and see if it's time to make that buying decision. Like, yes, it is time to invest in this for myself because it's something that has just kind of circled back around and I think I'm gonna get a lot of use out of it. Because sure, there are beautiful things, but we also wanna make sure that we wear them. And the thing to consider within that is like, is it the brand that matters? And that's okay. It is okay if the brand matters, or is it something that you can find a cheaper version of that there is no branding to it and it's just about getting the look of it. And in that sense, you can definitely opt to buy the cheaper version. Now, I say cheaper version and it like feels radioactive to us, doesn't it? But it's not. It's just shortening the distance between you and an item that you want in a lot of cases. Again, because we are not just wild animals with credit cards. TikTok would have us believe that if you have the money, you're going to go on Fashion Nova or whatever and just buy thousands of dollars worth of stuff and then send it straight to Goodwill after you've done your haul. That is not normal behavior. That is not what human beings do. We are all fully equipped with discernment in our minds and the ability to actually be conscious, awake consumers, and that whole philosophy doesn't really tempt most of us. The reason that those hauls exist is because brands are paying for them, okay? That's the only reason. Just be aware of that. That's not normal behavior. So now that you've taken back your agency mentally, you always had it, but now you've, reclaimed it mentally, let's examine what the item is. I keep using the same example of, these little adorable lounge sets that I've been buying, or like these really cute little Asian cut, like striped dresses that I've been getting from Amazon for, again, like $30, because I do love the thrill of a new thing and I know that I'm gonna get a ton of use out of something like this. And also with Amazon, you can return things. It's not like you're buying from Wish where it took 3 weeks to get there and you're like, well, this is a piece of crap, I guess I'm gonna throw it in the garbage. If you don't like something, you can just return it. But also bear in mind the material that it is. Like, should you ever pay a lot of money for gauze? No. Should you ever pay a lot of money for like lightweight cotton? Probably not. Like, as long as you like the cut of it and you can predict how it's gonna wash and how it's gonna feel, you're able to make the decision whether the material is actually worth paying for or whether it's gonna feel inexpensive no matter what. And if it's gonna feel inexpensive no matter what, don't overpay for it. Again, you are not going and buying the cheap knockoff that's unreturnable through Temu. You are just shortening the distance between you and the manufacturer instead of buying it, for some wild markup through a middleman. So the other side of that is, when do you invest? Because the investing idea can be really scary. It's like, I like that, it's expensive. Does that automatically mean that it's an investment? No, 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 no. I would say, especially as someone who has done this so much in her past, don't ever treat Neiman Marcus Last Call or My Teresa, Saks, whatever. If you see a bunch of designer stuff on sale, feel free to peruse it if that's your price range, but don't ever make a snap decision to buy an investment piece based on it being on sale. Now, if there's something that you've always loved and it's on sale, phenomenal. Seize the day. Carpe clothing, carpe Hermès, But like, if it's something that you're like, ooh, would I like that? And it's an investment price for you, I wouldn't recommend that. I wouldn't recommend it because there is, in my experience, a huge spectrum of quality and reliability of quality in the uber luxury space, because you have to think there are people who can just afford to spend the row kind of money on anything. And then there are people who that is just a completely astronomical, unimaginable amount of money even for one item. And so designers are making clothes in a lot of cases. I say clothes in a lot of cases, although the RHODE did put out a pair of $800 jellies or something like that. Like, I'm sorry. No. Just my opinion. But it's important to understand that there are items that have been marked up because of the brand and they're no higher quality than anything else except for the fact that the brand name is on it, versus something that is very high quality because it was made in Italy and because it's got this beautiful handmade, you know, leather, things like that, where you know the quality is going to be very reliable, and maybe they even have like a repair program or something like that as you wear these things out. Like a lot of these companies will resole shoes, or they will fix your bag or something like that if anything happens to it, and it's built for longevity. Those are the kinds of things that I personally see as investment pieces. But most of the like clothing that I am putting through the washing machine are not investment pieces. Investment pieces to me, again, are things that are like, you know, denim and leather goods and potentially jewelry, but like only if it's sentimental to you, because no one is going to like check the carat value on your jewelry. Like, no one cares. And something that is maybe a little bit controversial, but I will kind of die on this hill, and that is when the item is the item and it's about the brand that makes it, it's about the specific pair of shoes that you have found, you know, whatever, don't compromise. If you can afford it, save up for it, whatever, get the one. Get the thing that you want. Don't go buy a bunch of knockoffs, spend more money trying to fill that void of what it is that you really wish that you had. Just responsibly invest in the real thing, or don't, but do not settle. You will save yourself so much money and headache in the long run. I know that there are going to be exceptions to that, and not everyone has the same idea of what is the price of an investment, but within your reasonability of an investment, don't cheap out on yourself if you see it as something that is going to be like a wear everyday mainstay staple in your wardrobe. Because a lot of times what you are paying for is not just quality, but especially with denim, fit. Fit is everything, and I feel like expensive denim looks expensive. And my last tip on kind of sharpening your sense of decision making and discernment to being a conscious consumer is that, like, when you feel great, make a mental note of what it is that you're wearing, because it might surprise you. We all talk about unpacking the fantasy self, right? It's like, oh, I bought things for a person who like has a high powered job in New York City and I actually work from home kind of thing. You know, I have way too many heels or something. And it's like, we've all been through that. We've all like gotten just wrapped up in an identity that we thought that we were. And sometimes I think that that's kind of fun and healthy because you end up experimenting. But I also think that it is so important to ask yourself how you feel. And when you find that you feel really comfortable in your skin, and this could be in anything, it could be in a makeup look or in your clothing or whatever, when you feel really comfortable in your skin, go, okay, I want to like mark this moment and I want to just take a minute to understand why. Is it because I feel really at ease, or is it I'm showing off a certain part of my body that I'm really, really proud of, or like I feel like I did something a little bit different today that surprised me in a good way, or I really like this friction that I created between these two garments or something like that. Make mental note of those things because it's going to help you make your personal style personal, and it's going to help you be more confident in making what might feel like an impulsive decision before you've really sharpened those senses, but to be more confident in a hell yes versus a eh. So my final thoughts here, 1, embrace being a snob, okay? Just because you're on a beer budget doesn't mean you don't deserve to have champagne taste, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going and buying HERMÈS. It can mean that you just value quality, or that you have the values that you hold and that you're unwilling to compromise on those values just because something is inexpensive. That's being a snob. That's being discerning. That's being a conscious consumer, is saying that's not good enough for me. Instead of letting a brand or an Instagram ad or TikTok or whomever like tell you what it is that you're supposed to be wearing and how much you're supposed to be paying for it, say, I know what I like and I know what I have to spend, and I'm going to make the industry, what's out there on offer, work for me. Okay, and I'm not going to spend my dollars anywhere that doesn't deserve my money. I'm in charge, right? Take your agency back. 2, the real enemy is government regulation or lack thereof, okay? The reason that all of these, you know, polluting companies exist is because they're allowed to exist, not because we're out there buying H&M, okay? If there were affordable things out there that weren't polluting the earth, we would still buy them. We are not buying from H&M because it's funding horrible pollution. We are buying from H&M because it's what people can afford and the amount of money that people feel comfortable spending for the things that they're buying. And sure, there is a cheap thrill factor, but I think that there's something to be said for a cheap thrill factor because you don't want to spend a whole lot of money on a thrill. Right? You want to get satisfaction out of an investment. You don't want to get like a momentary thrill out of a pair of Gucci loafers. You want to wear those for life kind of thing and get them resold. Like it's just a different whole attitude. But the idea being that we, no matter what your kind of socioeconomic stratum is, we are not enemies to each other. The enemy is the bourgeoisie up here that, again, relies on us infighting so that we don't hold them accountable for their completely exponential responsibility for what's actually wrong. There's no trickle-down economics, but I don't feel like there's a lot of trickle-up economics either, okay? We just need regulations. Third, conscious consumerism, the paradox of it all, that is not really conscious consumerism. Conscious consumerism is actually honing and sharpening your discernment based on what you value in something, not about someone else's guardrails, about almost like maintaining some kind of diet as to how you shop for clothing or anything else. And that's gonna help you feel less guilty because you're going to own your decision making and understand that like there are a lot of considered reasons behind the decisions that you've made. And it's not just about kind of trying to appease some larger group that you might feel like you belong to, like, oh, I only shop this way, I only shop that way, and it's like this, you know, versus game. It's not. And the last one, pay attention to how you feel when you wear something. That's the biggest thing. I think that that is like how we curate. Curate is not just buying, curating is also combining and feeling and appreciating beauty for beauty's sake and appreciating simplicity and also maximalism and complexity and letting our inspiration sort of breathe through us so that we can sharpen, again, all of those discernment senses and be real conscious consumers. And that actually has a lot to do with listening to how you feel when you're wearing something, not just when you're buying something. So I hope this wasn't too far off the beaten path as far as beauty content is concerned. I feel like pretty much all of this could be applied to beauty as well, like buying beauty products and sort of like the feeling versus the outcome and like what you find valuable, what you really think is worth your money, and like that being conscious consumerism. And we can do more videos on that. I do want to make a video at some point about being a snob at the drugstore because I do think that it's possible. Like it's just, it requires some serious hunting and discernment, but you can have champagne taste on a beer budget at the drugstore and I highly encourage it. But if you did enjoy this video, please give the video a thumbs up. I would really appreciate that. If you're new here, I'm Khaki. Hi. We talk about beauty reviews, color theory, and consumer habits and things like that. Just trying to kind of keep a level head about it at all times and give yourself a lot of grace, give each other a lot of grace and understand that we are all in this together. I need to get off camera. If those things sound good to you, subscribe while you're here. I just try to make this a feel-good space and I hope that that's how y'all feel too. So yeah, subscribe for a feel-good space. I'll put a playlist up here that I think that you will enjoy if you liked this video. Thank you all for being here. I love you so much and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.